A Song for Silas by Laurie Wick. Chapter 37. Laughing, Amy watched with delight as Coco ran in small circles in front of her. Amy had just filled the dog's dish, but Coco wanted attention more than food, and Amy could not coax her into the stall she'd blocked off in the barn. Amy decided to go into the stall, and, as usual, Coco followed her. Amy felt almost guilty at tricking the dog, but as soon as Amy rushed out and pulled the plank back into place, the puppy headed to her dish. Leaning lazily against a post, Amy thought back on the day before when Silas had brought the little dog home. That Silas had been about to kiss her had been more than evident, and the truth of the matter was he had no right to such intimacies. But that didn't change the fact that she had panicked and responded badly, embarrassing them both. Amy then remembered the stilted feelings between them just before Silas had gone home. Somehow, knowing he would return in the fall had given Amy a sense of security. She didn't feel in a rush to right things between them. But now, being busy with the puppy the evening before had made conversation difficult, along with the fact that Silas was exhausted from the day he'd put in. But even considering Silas's physical state, Amy could not go to bed with things the way they were. Both men headed off to bed early, and Amy found herself alone in the living room. With determination, she marched halfway up the stairs and called to Silas through his closed door. "Silas, can I talk to you a minute?" The door opened after a moment, and Amy headed down the stairs to wait. Silas approached almost warily, his face shuttered. Amy thought instantly of how many times she had hurt him. Never intentionally, but hurt him nevertheless. "I know you're tired, but I wanted to thank you for the puppy. She's adorable, and I already love her dearly. It was very thoughtful of you." "You're more than welcome, Amy, and please let me apologize for doing things at times that make you uncomfortable." Amy had not expected this and made no reply. She shifted uneasily under the intense stare Silas directed at her, but his eyes held her own. His hand lifted then, and the backs of his fingers stroked ever so gently down her cheek. "Good night, sweetheart." His voice was as gentle as his touch. He turned and went upstairs. Now Amy stood gazing at Coco, thrilled to have the puppy, but totally unsure of how to deal with Silas and his feelings. "Hello?" Amy jumped with surprise and turned as a strange male voice called to her from the doorway of the barn. She had to walk nearly the length of the barn to reach him, her look curious but friendly. "Hello," the stranger said again as she approached. "I hope I'm on the right farm. My name is Paul Cameron. I'm looking for my brother, Silas." The first thing Amy noticed about the man was his height. The second was his voice. It was deep and perfectly modulated. The first comparison that came to her head was smooth as honey. Amy must have been staring because he spoke again. This time that perfect voice was filled with amusement. "Is this the Nolan farm?" "Oh, yes. I'm sorry." Amy felt flustered and moved within arm's reach, her hand outstretched. "I'm Amy Nolan, and Silas is in the field with my dad." "Good. I'm glad to know I have the right place. Maybe if you could point me in the right direction." "Oh, certainly. You can go out, but they'll be in for supper any time now if you just want to wait here at the house." Centering her gaze on his evidently new shoes, Amy thought, "They'll lose that shine very quickly if he walks all the way out to Silas and back." "I'm not really dressed to go out, am I?" The amusement was back in his voice, and Amy looked up to see him smiling at her. "My word," she thought, "he's almost as good-looking as my Silas." He was easily as tall, although his build was slighter, and his hair was just as dark, cut close to his well-shaped head. He was clean-shaven, and Amy couldn't decide what was more appealing, his blue eyes with just a touch of green in them, or that full, smiling mouth filled with perfect white teeth. Paul Cameron was doing some admiring of his own. Grandma M had said there was someone special, but Silas had shared little with her, and other than the fact that the situation was not ideal, Graham knew next to nothing about the woman Silas loved. Paul's first impression was how pretty she was. About Suzanne's build, but her hair even more blonde. The dress she wore was a pale pink and white stripe. It seemed to put color in her cheeks even as her warm blue eyes smiled kindly at him. When Amy spoke, it was her turn to be amused. "Would you like to wait in the house?" Paul grinned at her, totally undaunted by the fact that he'd been caught staring. "Yes, Amy Nolan, I believe I will wait in the house. I hope my arrival won't put you out in any way." "Oh, no, you're more than welcome. By the way, is Silas expecting you?" "No," Paul answered as he held the door open to the kitchen. "I just made a surprise trip home to Baxter. I wouldn't have been a surprise if I had written ahead to see if everyone was home. I'm headed up north, and when I found out where Silas was, I decided I'd just stop in on the way." "Well, I'm sure he's going to be thrilled." Amy took his coat and bag and saw him settled in the living room with a cup of coffee. She then went to the kitchen to finish supper, and Paul forced himself not to pace as he waited for the brother he longed to see.